Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Athenæum here, the Executive Director of the Redwood Library. Now, we do special events all the time, and this is like special. If it was cheese, we're talking triple cream. The Redwood Library is many things. It's the first purpose-built library structure. It's the earliest Palladian building, the longest operating. The most important thing that it is the signal institution of the American Enlightenment, right? From that fact, I would propose that the ultimate faculty of an enlightened mind is self-awareness, all right? And from there, in practical terms, self-critique. And that is to do what you're doing and have an understanding of method and critique what you're doing as you're doing it. That's essentially what has driven the bulk of our programming at the Redwood Library. And we've applied the critical apparatus of the Enlightenment to this signal institution of the Enlightenment. And you might remember, for example, especially in contemporary art, the Pascal Martin-Tailloux, the repressed histories, the extractive legacies of colonialism with Tara Barclay. Thank you, Belinda. The positivist worldview and its limits that derive from Enlightenment science with Jocelyn Prince, and the current exhibition, which is all about the fallacy of encyclopedic learning. All right? Now, why do we want to critique it? We want to be cranky? No. It's because it is the cradle of modernity. If you really want to understand the world today, you really want to have a clear understanding of the lineage. I mean, everything that, most things that shape our world today, the museum, art exhibitions, newspapers, fashion, celebrity culture, all came to be in its modern form in the 18th century. And so, when you get a handle on the 18th century, you really begin to have a clear picture of historical understanding of today. Now, contemporary art in the Redwood Library, there are some people who really says, we need to stick with lettering books and poetry readings. You do those too. But remember that libraries were novel communal spaces in the 18th century, right? Novel communal spaces are always politically charged. What it means for us today is that we were never meant to be a sort of house museum pitched to the 18th century. We were always meant to engage with contemporary culture, all right? So that's where we are now. And I'll leave it at that. I'm going to thank our donors who made this marvelous purchase possible. The Ford Foundation, Neil Vaughn and Ann Blackwell, Belinda Keelan, Stephen Schwartzman, and Robin and Fred Warren. I want to thank them all for their very kind assistance in So, with that, I'm going to sit down and let you begin. So here it is.
Great. Well, welcome, Fred. We are so happy to have you here at the Redwood in Newport. And welcome to everybody who's here tonight. It's really wonderful to see you all. Thank you so much for coming and helping us celebrate, really, this amazing new gift that we have in this space. Tonight, what we want to do, though, is have a conversation about what it means, why this is here, what it means to have a contemporary sculpture in this historic institution, and what we think it begins to bring and add to the space in terms of starting a conversation with its building, with its architecture, and the role that is in it. And so I'm just going to start by telling you all the title of this amazing chandelier, which is called No Way But This. And as many of you know, it comes, of course, from Shakespeare's play Othello. It is one of the final lines. And the couplet that it's from, I have to bring a little card because my aging memory is failing, but the couplet goes, I kissed thee ere I killed thee, no way but this, killing myself to die upon a kiss. And then Othello stabs himself. I mean, of course, the title, No Way But This, is extremely rich and provocative. But I was thinking perhaps we could start there, Fred. What were you thinking with this title?
Well, I had thought about grasping pictures from Othello as I'm so invested in Shakespeare's works within it, especially Othello. And so I kept use these titles for Othello as a way to bridge my own thinking his phrases, his writing. No way but this is a whole scene I've used all parts of that statement that Othello makes. But no way but this really kind of embodies how I felt about this particular one. I'm very glad. I was thinking, the other ones are kind of large, similarly, but simpler certainly. And this one has these large orbs in it particularly, and very complex in comparison. And so thinking about Othello and how complex the plot that goes on through, and then becomes completely simple but very mournful. And I think it's that in all these works that make it like that, Othello is magnificent. He's mournful. And so I just thought that I wanted to do all this ideas together within this particular piece. And so, yeah, it's very useful, very helpful to kind of look at Othello and see my thoughts writ large, but in a profound way. That's kind of how I use these titles. And Philip Black has so many various themes that I want to. I felt that we needed something that's just as say exactly what it comes to because actually there is no more answer there. The variety of things that I've done with these works come to me, and I don't have a specific answer why these large orbs are within it. and then I decided I was always at this point develop some just pieces of recognition work that I did for the Venice Biennale was a collection here. Similar scale, very different, similar but not as complex as this. And I think this one was incredibly much better here than that one would. And I'm glad that one was in Venice because it's very different. But because the space is so, it's the use space, exhibition space. And so it's kind of frenetic with all the books. And certainly with this gallery of men.
There's a woman right there.
She's hiding.
But I just think that this one kind of exploded in a certain way. Really sort of honestly moving and changing and but it just has kind of this
the Venice Biennale was in 2006, you must have been working on your shortly after 9/11. Was that a factor as a New Yorker when you came to Venice and were thinking about this as a kind of memorial? Okay. Well, we could do it, right? But I guess, I guess thinking about it, yeah.
Maybe so. I mean, you do things, and then you reflect on it, and you embody this how.
I mean, I guess, to go back for a minute longer to the original first of these chandeliers that you talked about, making for the Venice Pavilion at the Venice Biennale 2003. I don't know if there was anyone who saw Frank's work in that exhibition in 2003 in the US Pavilion, or who perhaps remembers the US Pavilion from other visits. But in any event, the US Pavilion is this very neoclassical building. It was built in the 1920s, but it's in a Palladian style. It has, it looks essentially very similar to the Redwood, where it is a kind of celebration and memorial to a certain idea of classical culture that the US, even as late as 1920, was still aspiring to shape itself in. And so that is the principal difference, which is that the Redwood was built in 1747, which really was one of the early, in fact I think it was the earliest example of a neoclassical building in the country, as opposed to a much later revival built soon before Europe became very fashioned. I think that seeing, when I saw pictures, because I did not see original work in Venice, so when I saw pictures of, as you said, this very dynamic, baroque, kind of wild chandelier against the austerity of the pavilion, it seemed to resonate in certain ways with some of the context of the Redwood.
It's very true. Yeah, it's very true. And I don't think that I really have these contrasts mostly I was thinking of the Venice Biennale that year. I had there almost a year working on this project. And since I had just realized writing going to Venice, so I have a glass in my hand, going to Venice, seeing this American glass and the Venetian glass, it's so different. In the slightness of the story, I really felt I needed to continue that glass there with the Venetian glass. And I also was very but they had and there's one particular one, Carpaccio, where Carpaccio, which I love Carpaccio, but the painting is a subject that wasn't something that I was really focusing on, but they had these canal and Gabriele moving throughout the canal, and one of them is these very prominently pictured in this prominent black chandeliers, and actually in a lot of people in that period they were active people, and it's something that is not discussed. Let's put it that way, until recently. So I focus on this track, and it wasn't in the popular literature or anything, but apparently there was a league of black communities in Venice at that time. And people came from everywhere in Venice, France, Germany, in all different countries around, other places to make this, New York, to make this new place. They wanted to be there, and they were a lot. So I just want to focus on that side of the so, all we have what did everybody understand online, but also just these very evocative moments and they create these objects that sort of make sense of so that more forward, magnificent,
In what instance you use the word monster?
monstrous, that was the word. Because there are so large, and you can deal with it,
So I want to come back to that word monstrous, because that's a very interesting word to describe this piece. But before we do, I also just, I guess, want to think about the way, going back to the memorial idea. So in some sense, perhaps the project was about a memorial to erased histories, the erased histories of blackness. In Venice, the erased histories of blackness in Europe as a whole, the erased histories of blackness in classicism, in neoclassicism, right? Because, I mean, I think if we think about classicism, most people in the US do not think about Africa as being central to classical Greece, and of course it was. And so I think that what Fred's project did was really begin to open up to much larger questions about how we think about representation, not just representing blackness, but representing whiteness, representing Europeanness, representing classicism. But on that issue of representation, you're asked to represent the US, which just always feels like a very strange proposition for an individual to represent a nation in this loaded context. And then you turn to Othello, which, as you pointed out, is another representation, the representation of blackness. And then you call that first piece, Speak of Me as I Am, which is also from the final, from Othello's final speech. And that title, Speak of Me as I Am, I think is a very clear and powerful call to fair representation. I mean, Othello says very clearly, don't embellish my reputation, don't lie and bullshit, but also don't say things that are untrue. Represent me as I am. Interesting, I'm looking at Dan nodding and I'm thinking, but of course there's a very important legal aspect to representation, both in art and in law, and both of which are very fraught in this country. So, can we talk about representation and the way in which I guess the artwork in some sense is a representation of blackness, this kind of very layered, removed depiction, meditation on this slippery subject.
Also represents the artist who are in it. And so all these big imaginations of these sort of myself, I don't want to attack that, just really so important. But I mean, you all work yourself.
Interesting that you say that because, often people men will say what it's about and try to say this is not one simple meaning, it's about many things, perhaps it's a portrait of Othello, and perhaps it's about blackness, and perhaps it's about repressed histories, but I had not been thinking of it in a way, perhaps, as a kind of displaced self-portrait, which of course, so much work always is. But the idea of a displaced self-portrait brings me to your other work in which displacement is so central. All of your work, I think, is about displacement, about moving things from one place to another and suddenly helping people understand, wow, of course, I knew that, but now I see it. did have thoughts actually about where I was going with this, but I might have just talked myself over the edge. But what I think I was thinking about really was, the way in which your work is always at the root, and particularly for us, your approach of displacement in this instance comes from using literature, which of course makes it a fantastically perfect fit for a library, and brings back the interconnectedness of art and literature in a way that, it's unusual, I think, for visual artists to be so deeply engaged with the text over 20 years, and to come back to it, and to read it, and reread it, and what is the role of language in reading in your work? Well, that's the idea to try to think about other things. Because this work is so rich and interesting, and there's so much there. And I think having it in a library, it's dead obvious, but it really does emphasize the literary aspect of it, and the dialogue with the text that brings the text back to us. I haven't thought about Othello for a long time. And now, I'm looking back and I'm thinking it's amazing the richness of the source that it could be this object of dialogue for you. But yeah, I think on a larger level, it really kind of helps to reunite contemporary art with literature and art with books in a way that is really interesting. All right, so let me shift a little bit and maybe go back to where Benedict left off, which is this idea of light and enlightenment. It's a chandelier. It's obviously central as a utilitarian vessel of light at some level. And in fact, there was a chandelier in this space historically. It's a useful thing that we have in addition to, of course, being very beautiful. It was particularly resonant for us as we start to think about what Benedict alluded to as this double legacy of the Enlightenment, which is that the Redwood is an Enlightenment institution, but the way that we think about the Enlightenment has to be as a contradictory historical formation. In other words, the Enlightenment is all about refinement in culture and taste, but at the most literal, basic level, cultural refinement here was brought with and produced by a man who owned 300 enslaved people at his plantation, where they refined sugar, and that's what funded cultural refinement. So there's a kind of very material link between aspirations to refinement in culture and the bloody, violent source from which it came. And the latter, of course, is always completely buried. It's not visible. And part of what we wanted to do, even with this beautiful, refined object, is begin to give a glimpse into the other side of these histories as not only being related, but arguably being back together in a way that is one enabled the other, right? The violence, in a sense, produced American culture as it is now. And so the Enlightenment as an institution comes with a certain kind of rhetoric of not only life, but also truth. And if you think about the two contemporary institutions, that were founded around the same time as Redwood, as I mentioned in my essay, of course, Harvard, Lux, Yale, Lux et Veritas, light and truth, right? And so that's all very well, but the thing is that set of metaphors really hinges on a series of oppositions. Just as Othello's blackness stands in contrast and against the whiteness of the characters, and Shakespeare works with that opposition, so too the dominant metaphor of enlightenment is one that works through the other side of that idea, which is blackness and dark. As they are constructed in the Judeo-Christian tradition, they have often been represented as metaphors of death, darkness, shadows, and fear. And so, as we begin to rethink the Enlightenment, we need to think about the way in which we are representing classicism and the Enlightenment through these images of light. So the image of black light and of producing light through opacity and through blackness and through a kind of, at a visual level, something that looks very different from matte white classicism, but at a deeper level is heavily involved with trying to retrieve a different version of history was obviously very important to us. And so Fred and I were talking a little bit before about the author Martin Bernal, who essentially argued that classical civilization is indebted to Africa and the Middle East. And he wrote a book called Black Athena. And one of the things he talks about is the way that he was very much attacked because people say, oh no, the Greeks were white and pale and they had nothing to do with Africa or the Middle East. And he responded by saying, I'm not an enemy of Europe, I am an enemy of the idea of purity. The idea that purity ever existed, he thought was unlikely. And the idea that purity could produce an interesting civilization, he thought was even more unlikely. And he said, the reason I'm interested in Greece is precisely because it was a mix. It was a mix of cultures. And that's exactly what Venice was too, which I think Fred's work really, really picks up on. But I'm wondering if you can just sort of, Fred, maybe talk a little bit to those themes that have been so foundational in your work for many decades. I mean, you were really the first, I think, to engage with Bernal, to engage with that idea of Africa as central to classical culture and...
Well, I mean, when I read the book, it was really and my father so it became pretty clear what I was we're a mixed bag and so I've made many books. But so that was intriguing. Put back around. Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of I did want to say one thing that I didn't was that life sort of is absorbed really there to reflect. And so of course it comes to black is sort of absurd on it. It's not doing what it's supposed to do. And that's why there was no collection in your paragraph prior to. brings it to, kind of creates a dialogue that would never happen, or a thought that would never happen, even if it's not even a thought or an emotion that would never happen. And so, we're overwhelmed by the room, however, this place is home. And it's completely different. And which is very much about describing color. That would be one of these words. So I could have felt a better environment because you have to. It's not like something that's there. But the environment sort of makes you try to understand its being.
And my last question before we move to questions from the audience is about beauty. Because I think one of the reasons this chandelier works so beautifully in this space is that it is a beautiful, seductive object. How do you think about beauty in your work?
I love using beauty because it is something that one can often just dismiss. So I try to squeeze the meaning out of beauty. I try to make you think about beauty, even though it's not as I want you to necessarily. And so I kind of go back to that often. To reveal your thoughts about beauty necessarily, so I've been doing that. And this one is in this environment.
Okay, and so I'm going to just end our conversation with a quote from Elm Green and Grasset, because artists always say it best, and they essentially, I can't find it, but they basically, when they were curating the Istanbul Biennale a couple of years ago, they commissioned Fred to make an amazing series of works that really thought about Istanbul and the relationship, the kind of cross-cultural nature of that city with a whole other set of histories that related but also are very different. And so they said something like, I paraphrase, the brilliance of Fred Wilson's work is that it brings history into the present. It makes it live, and it makes us understand that our shared contemporary culture is history. And I just love how they said that in that very succinct way, because people often ask about the relationship of history to contemporary art, and I think in your work it becomes something that is just so powerfully married together that it almost makes the question seem absurd, but by the same token, if you do have any thoughts that you do want to add in terms of history, not that it's necessary because I think your work does say it all, but is there anything else that you wanted to say in terms of using history or thinking about history and its relationship to the present? And so I'm sure that your work and your words have provoked people's thoughts, and I'm sure people do have questions. And so I just quickly want to open up and see, we can pass the mic around and see if there's anyone who has any questions or thoughts about this piece. So yeah, here we go.
Oh, hi. Okay, so I know you have a very broad body of work, and you started out as a painter. What inspired you to work in the medium of chandeliers?
Oh, well, I've always been a sculptor. My mother's a painter, so Well, you know, I come to glass really without any background in it. But the year 2008 was also at that the first one's free. Why do you think that? So I really got very, all kind of, the very thing that I think that I had walls of glass that, because of that, which I and before drop. I use that over and over black mirrors as well. Another, a ridiculous thought, but it has been very fruitful in the Venetian style. I mean, I don't get some of the people, that when I first wanted to make the first chandelier, the glass masters said, well, what do you want to do? I said, well, I want to make a chandelier. Very big. No, I'm not very good. You'll go over and I want them black. It was the first one in Venice, anywhere, making a black chandelier. They all came, they all were excited to see where people were, they didn't have So, I really enjoyed the relationship that I have with artists and speaking by talents, but there's a lot of things I tried and I thought maybe do it for the rest of my life. And so, but I learned a lot from them. I really can see some black shadows with the gold tips on the ends of faces. And so these relationships are really helpful because I develop ideas and they know what material they do. And it kind of see something like have whole vision how I want to look at it, totally surprised. So I really look for people that are something that they can look at whatever we do out of it.
And one of Fred's mirrors is in the National Gallery. You see when you're next down there. But you may pass them out with those.
As soon as you leave, people will be looking for things within in the chandelier, like messages. Any messages? Anything mean anything? No, it's good. It's just destroy, the tour.
I could just say, yes.
I just want to say that also for a chandelier to work, it has to make some ceiling in new type, otherwise it's just an object. And as I said, under this chandelier, I really start feeling that like cosmos, I mean the world of the planet, the center is like the sun, the gravity. So there is this sort of experience that also brings into play the space around it, which is the same in all of these buildings. So I just wanted to add that. But I also want to say that there's a difference between thinking about history and I think what you're doing, quality for many years, but what you're doing is giving us a pathway
to reclaim certain kinds of historical events, and I think that's important. Leora has just talked about how it is important to bring Black, what we might say, descendants of Africa into play as we talk about Enlightenment and as we talk about the riches that have been gained by Western culture. Certainly, descendants of Africa being part of that. So we heard from rooted in the historical context as well. And so I thank you for doing that and being willing to bring that to our
You chose this one for this chandelier. Why did you choose this one? And after this one, do you think you would put it in another one?
I am going to defer that question to my husband, the director, who was responsible for actually tagging this monumental.
Well, when we decided a few years ago to buy important pieces of contemporary art, we can't have some big Richard Serra 2-ton thing in the Venice room because it's an active space. So we need things that are out of the way. When I pitched it to the board, I did a mock-up of the chandelier in that room, but that room is so cavernous. There used to be 2 chandeliers, really beautiful giant ones, in the Venice room that are long gone. Where they went. It became clear that it would have been dwarfed in that cavernous room. And part of it, and what's really interesting too is that at the Chrysler Museum in Norfolk, Virginia, they have the chandelier almost just like 2 feet off the ground, so that they're looking at it as an object, not as an art object, not as a functional piece. So it operates in that space between functional chandelier and artwork to be marveled at. And it's also interesting to note that all of the others are in white box museums. MoMA, Detroit, Cleveland, the MFA Houston. So I think we're the only historic institution that has a chandelier. But it really is just pragmatic reasons. The scale fits in here. It does not fit in that back room. So.
But it's not going anywhere.
Oh, sure.
We have it in working chandelier. It is not just for actually use it for lighting.
Well, we were thrilled because, when they came, they were like, we're going to have to rewire the whole thing, finish the wire, all that stuff. And they were already there, so I was like, great. I had to find an instructional engineer, hey, make it happen. So I'm on the phone, trying to find people. And then they had to, when the Redwood was renovated, the one spot that they did not survey with architectural drawings was this couple. It was rock solid. So we had nothing to go by. I had no idea what's up there. So, we now know what's up there. I have to take that into consideration.
Fred, I was intrigued when you said that you come up with a name afterwards and you're not really clear on where you're going, that process, that creative process. And as I physically inspect this marvelous chandelier, I'm struck by how you use spheres and delicate tulips, roses, it seems, all sorts of different. I'm just curious how you selected those objects as you
There, there's this kind of encyclopedia, not physical, of objects and things that the Venetians made to put together. And I usually don't. I usually use what they have for their vocabulary, but I don't do what they do. And so it always it's much more of a challenge for me to understand their aesthetic and put it into my melodies to it, aesthetics and reason for making them. And much more challenging, much more enjoyable, because I'm sort of seeing it fresh. They've been working with this for since the 1700s. People don't like that a little bit, but you know what I mean. And so, and they really enjoy working with me because I'm using good tools. I mean, I think they really enjoy working with me because I don't push them into something that they would never make. But just seeing it work, I crank it out and make this certain types of thing. But seeing something different, it's designed for them. It's not really. There are various thoughts about chandelier making, chandeliers, and
Thank you. Oh, no, I don't need that. I'm wondering what you make of the current reactionary resistance to having school children examine the history that has been hidden, or to, as Bob was saying, to explore this idea that certain aspects of American history have been intentionally covered up. Because it seems that the resistance is really strident, and it seems that it's a repetition of what's gone on for more than 2 centuries. And as an artist, is that something that you could confront, or are you already confronting?
Sort of understand your question. I work with certain idioms that I can work with. I work with things that I think I can reveal something by not by words, but by just something being there and really think something in a certain way. Of course, my other art side is that I work with museums. Take their things and make exhibitions and make their own things and make exhibitions in ways that they meant people do. But there it is. And so, really why I'm sitting here with you. But it's, I'm interested in I want people to think things deeply. I don't expect to change people's lives, but I try to impact things in my way so that they can see it from a different vantage point, a different perspective, but not feel either rejected or just immediately shut down. Artists really can be a really good vehicle for it. Beauty is a very good vehicle for getting people to their own perception of things and seeing perhaps a place where we both choose to agree or at least see each other.
have in other, maybe that's what John was talking about, maybe difficult to have in other places. But what I wanted to ask was something that had started earlier, and I can't do that and that is this idea of lineage or idea of art going on a very defined path up to the point where we call modernism an ended, and after that point it's sort of like free fall, we call it postmodernism. Anyway, I'm wondering as we have this conversation right now about reclaiming history or taking different kinds of looks at history, if that is true, that there's still a need, or there's still a need, or there's still a pathway to understanding not just what we're doing now, but that pathway is very clear, that connection between that point where we saw modernism and to where we are now. And I might have lost my thought now, but since we have you here, I thought I would get your thought on that.
Well, let's just say that it's long and deep, and I think I can ruminate on that a little more.
Oh, it's
I'll talk to you later.
Mr. Wilson, thank you. Thank you for being here and thank you for speaking with us. So you had a long and deep question. Mine is really simple. How long does it take to create one of these?
Which end? The glass doors or the me?
Both. The entire process, from the time you conceive of it to the time it is done.
Oh, well, yeah, it takes 3 months. Because I'm using the form to pick it up. I told them to make this form that they never made before. They have to figure that out. And they also have to figure out how it's going to stay up there. So that would be a much longer process. But I'm using their forms. And they change slightly. But it's one they know and they can figure it out. Well, the ones in the Istanbul ones I think are the most. I made changes in Istanbul because it was not very good. I'm involved with Venice, and Venice has a long history with the Ottomans, and warring and trading, and there's a big relationship between the two. So I made this couple of chandeliers for that show, a combination of Venetian chandeliers and Ottoman style chandeliers. And they're melded together with two different scales. The Venetian tiny inside Ottoman chandelier. So, and, you know, it's kind of and of course, what's interesting is the Venetian guy sent all this. We sent the canisters, because they're the metal canisters, to Venice for him to intermingle as I wanted within not this picture, but a black chandelier with the scale. And he figured it out. I mean, because it was, he understands the structure. And this is valves too. So they're staying like this. They're making it easy. Really,
Do you ever work with sound? Because I would love to hear the conversation between all of these people up here and the chandelier.
But I work with whatever, I work with whatever material makes sense to do with artwork that I make. So I work with sound, just
That is amazing.
and there's an artist out there who would love to do it.
I may have missed something, but I can't stop looking at the 3 orbs. I've never seen a chandelier that's asymmetrical.
There you go.
And
No, I mean, it's, I'm sure when I first gave the play to glass people, they had to figure out the dates so that they would not and that was the magic they did, because I didn't move anything around so that it would be symmetrical. Because I didn't want it to be specific. But they figured it out. I don't know.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say back to, or add on to the comment of sound. From this perspective, there's an amazing conversation going on with the tree and the chandelier, and I can't wait to see this. If we have a wintry backdrop over, it's going to be amazing. Yeah.
About a month ago, I walked into the Redwood library. I never know when I come. I just come. I come and I go get books or whatever. And I walked in here, and my mouth was a little wide open. And I said, "Oh my God, how beautiful! It's black and it's beautiful." And I took a look at it and looked around it, and I said to myself, this is a piece of work. This is art that's going to be here centuries from now. Centuries. And our children will look into the Redwood Library and they will say, did you see that chandelier at the Redwood Library? That's going to be the object. They're going to remember and will encourage them to learn more history about the city of Redwood.
Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you.